Welcome to Streetwise Opera in Nottingham.
Oh, hello, my name's Natalie, and welcome to this talk today about nature and the environment.
Hello, we're an organisation who showcase the talents of people who have experienced homelessness and mental health support.
Hello, my name's Diana. Our project's about nature, and we've written words to show how nature can impact our mood and also how climate change and pollution has impacted nature.
Hello, I'm Simon, Streetwise Opera performer from Nottingham. We are now going to introduce our panellists who are experts in their own field, their expertise linked to our very important theme. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark, and panelists do the solve.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jon Lewney. I'm the Countryside Manager for the National Trust for Cork Abbey and the reservoirs Formock and Staunton Harold. So I manage about 2,000 hectares, which is an enormous area of woodland and wood pasture and lakes and every kind of nature habitat you can imagine.
Hello everybody, lovely to meet you this afternoon. My role, I'm the Carbon Neutral Engagement Officer for Nottingham City Council, and I work on Nottingham's strategy for tackling the climate and ecological emergency, which is called Carbon Neutral Nottingham 2028. So my job involves going out and speaking to people all about those issues. One day I could be attending an event, one day I could be doing training or leading on projects to help change behaviour so we can be a bit more environmentally friendly. So that's my job in a nutshell. It's lovely to see you today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I think that's the first time I've ever been introduced as an expert in my field as well. That felt very nice. So appreciate that. Hi, I'm Jack. I'm from Surrey County Council and I lead on our Green Health and Wellbeing programme here. It's a programme that is essentially trying to find out how we can embed nature more into our health and wellbeing practices. So whether that's dementia or in GP surgeries or children's mental health, just trying to figure out what's the best way of trying to make nature a part of that healthcare offer, as well as trying to sort of promote ways that people can keep themselves well that involves nature as well. You might have come across the term green social prescribing before. That's becoming a little bit more popular these days, that phrase, and that's essentially the kind of world that I work in. So thank you all for having me.
Hello everyone, I'm Caroline and I'm a Streetwise performer. So my question to you is, what can we do as a community to protect our environment for this and future generations?
So I guess for me, it's about doing the small things, everything from your back garden and letting the grass grow a bit longer and picking up litter and encouraging others to do the same. Those are things grow into big things, so generate that goodwill, and that's about everybody playing their part. And things like Streetwise Opera or Scouts, Guides, Cubs, Rugby Club, all those things where there's little communities, the church, the mosque, whatever those things are, where there's communities that come together to try and do the good for the community, they can be really helpful in us driving things for nature without us really knowing it. There's a little bit about how we use the things that we've got around us. So the amount of chemical we use, what sort of chemicals we use around our homes, the things you don't necessarily think about because they're every day. If you can start to think about greener ways of washing your car, doing your washing up, washing your clothes, they're simple things and they're really effective in making sure that our watercourses are cleaner.
I think I'm next in the running order, I think. And I think that's a really, really good question. It's one I get asked a lot, actually. In my job, the big thing I talk about is climate change or global heating, as we like to call it now. And that is the biggest threat to nature, but also to people as well that we're facing at the moment. So a real priority, what we need to do as a community and as a society is really bring down our carbon emissions and make sure we're not emitting as much pollution into the atmosphere, which is causing that global heating. So thinking about Nottingham as a city that you all live in, the biggest areas of our carbon emissions, the biggest sources that they come from, are how we travel around the city and how we heat and power our homes. So we can reduce those by choosing more sustainable modes of travel, so using public transport like the buses or the trams, using active travel, so walking, wheeling or cycling our short journeys. And if everyone just swaps a few journeys, that will really make a big impact across our city. In terms of making our homes more efficient, there are grants available. Some of my colleagues support people with to put insulation in their home to help bring down their energy bills, saving them some money as well as some carbon emissions at the same time. That's not everybody will be eligible for those, but those little bits to save energy at home all add up, as I said, across the city. But Jon really helpfully mentioned a few kind of smaller actions, and certainly all those actions are really important. The little things definitely are valuable and they all add up. But what I would suggest is that you choose, I suppose, your environmental challenge or your carbon reduction challenge, make that a habit and then look for the next one. So you might be recycling at the moment, but maybe you might think in the future about eating less meat in your meals, for example. And then if that becomes a habit, you could choose something else. But also what I think is really important to do as a society is not just try and reduce global heating, but to adapt to it. Because does anyone remember the heat waves we had a couple of years ago? That had a really big impact on our society. So things like that are sadly going to keep happening and be more frequent. So we need to adapt our cities and adapt our society to deal with that. So we can do simple things like greening our cities, which is very, kind of on theme with what we're talking about today, because cities with more green spaces in them are cooler. So during those heat wave events, we won't be struggling as much in those situations. We'll be cooler as a city. So there are lots of different things we can do. But I would say the big ones, think about how you travel and think about how we use energy efficiently, wherever we might be using it.
I love this question, and I think I maybe come at it from a slightly different perspective from yourselves, Danielle and Jon, because I come at it from one that's more to do with health. And I think for me, in the work that I'm involved in, it becomes about recognizing the health value that nature has to offer us. We know it on the sort of intuitive level. We also now know it on more of a sort of scientific level with all the years of research that have gone into it. That being outside in nature, it's good for us. It lowers our stress, improves our mood, improves our immune system, even improves lung function, and it encourages exercise, all of these fantastic things that can help keep us well. And it also makes sense from a sort of evolutionary perspective as well, that it's good to be outside. Like the sound of running water means there's fresh water nearby. Green grass means that your crops are going to grow there. If there's bird song, it means that there's probably no predators nearby. Our brains, they're kind of wired to feel relaxed and happy in these environments, and it's our brain's way of sort of telling ourselves that we should stay there. It's safe there, and you can thrive in this place. So we know that being in nature and feeling connected to nature, that helps keep us well, right? And I'm going somewhere with this. Do bear with me. And then there's also, I'm going to bring politics into it very briefly, do forgive me, but there's the sort of political, across the whole political spectrum, kind of regardless of what your political persuasion is, at the top of everyone's agenda is health. Regrettably, environmental issues, they do vary in importance, and depending on where you sit on that political spectrum, some of them have it at the top, some of them maybe less near the top, but everyone has health, regardless of sort of what you think in politics. Everyone thinks health is right at the top. So if we can bring it to everyone's attention that our natural environment plays or can play a really big role in preventing ill health, then it raises the political profile, the political importance of our environment as well. We start seeing our environment as a health asset, something that can take care of us. And if we and all of our sort of political leaders as well can realise the value our environment has as a health asset that keeps us well, then it encourages both those politicians and us as people to take better care of our environment as well. If we can appreciate that it is something that can prevent lung disease or reduce depression, improve blood pressure, all of these great things, even reduce loneliness as well, then why wouldn't we as a community and as a political system want to do more to look after our environment?
How do you plan to protect and support our young people in the current climate change crisis?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. I think young people are the some of the most difficult to get hold of because they're so time poor. When you start to look at school and other extra activities, how do you actually engage with them on a social level? And we're working quite hard at the moment to get young people out to have a look, even if they're not thinking about nature. Jack's point is really clear. Actually, just being outside is really good. If you're not outside, you don't value it. So you've got to get out there and do more outdoor activity. And that is the perfect thing for young people is around sport and a lot of adventure sport and a lot of even just going for a walk. City centre living for a lot of young people means that they have very little access to nature. And that low level of access means that they get low engagement across all the natural world. So how do we bring people to places like the National Trust where it's an expensive visit? How can we give opportunities for people who can't afford to come? How do we get public access, public transport access into our places? Because a lot of them are very remote and it's very difficult to get to. It's those kind of questions that are coming across for us to how we get people to engage more with nature. And some of that is being done by us going out into the communities and starting to work, especially in city centres, rather than come and visit us, we'll come and visit you and tell you what's there. It's the really immerse things, frog spawn, bird mess. We've done quite a bit recently with venison, where a lot of people balk at the idea of us culling wild deer, but actually the wild deer are a real great tool for us to use with young people because they're fascinated about the anatomy, they're fascinated about where their meat comes from and their food comes from, and the things that a lot of people find revolting, children find really interesting. So those kind of simple but kind of immersive things are the way we're moving forward with getting young people involved.
I suppose I'm always mindful that I don't get to do as much with young people as I would like to. There's only one of me and there's quite a lot for me to do, but when I do, I always really, really enjoy it. I've been in schools and done a few assemblies and talks, and only last week, as part of the Festival of Science and Curiosity in Nottingham, we did a family learning workshop, and we did all kinds of messy experiments to explore kind of the impacts of climate change. It was chaos, but we had great fun. And I think not just focusing on the young people, but using that as an opportunity for them to learn about climate change alongside the adults in their life is a really key opportunity, because that's when the really meaningful conversations can happen. What I tend to do is signpost, work through young people in schools and signpost schools to local organisations who can kind of support the school a little bit better in developing an action plan about how they can reduce their carbon emissions and support their pupils to get involved in that process. But what I found is many young people that I have worked with are very anxious about climate change and what's happening to our environment and nature. They see some really scary things on the news, and it can be really hard to feel resilient to that. They don't think enough is being done to address that, in short. And there's definitely a role for organisations like mine, councils, to provide leadership in that, to show the good things that are happening, the plans that we have, and lead people and say, this is the action that we need to take, and this is how you can join us in that. But I think there's a role we can all play in supporting our young people, and that's to be positive role models. Any young people that you've got in your life, if you role model those habits that help nature, that reduce our carbon emissions, that are taking action on the things which are making them anxious and causing concern to our younger generations, that instills that habit in them. Also shows, this matters to adults. They care about my future, and that helps alleviate that anxiety as well. But I often get this question about what we're doing for young people, but I wouldn't, I suppose what I'll kind of say at the same time is the future doesn't just belong to the young. We've all got a stake in that. So certainly we should be taking action for our young people, but we should be taking action for our futures as well. The global heating that we're seeing now, it's going to get worse during our lifetime. So we've got a stake in this just as much as young people.
I really liked this question. I think it's a really important consideration, and one that often a group that often gets quite overlooked. And I think my answer here is probably going to have a lot of similarities to Danielle's as well. Before my current job, I used to work in child and adolescent mental health, and climate anxiety was, and I suspect still is, like you've said, Danielle, a very real thing amongst young people. This fear that kind of comes from witnessing the climate crisis that's going on around young people, around all of us, the deforestation and the wildfires we see over in California, for example, or biodiversity loss. That sort of that sense of hopelessness and the uncertainty of how that's going to affect their lives and the world that young people are going to inherit. And to be quite honest, I don't think I'm entirely surprised that that's causing a lot of anxiety. And I think it would be quite an incredible exception to have this going on around us and to not feel some sense of worry or anxiety around it. So for me, in the role that I have and kind of what's within my gift to do, it becomes about kind of creating opportunities for young people to share those worries, to acknowledge them, to address them, often alongside other young people who share similar worries as well. And in my work, what that often looks like is through the project that I run that primarily aim to improve well-being through nature connection. But it's through these that young people then can also learn more about environment and hopefully feel a little bit less alone in their worries when they're doing that alongside other young people as well. And also then find opportunities to get involved in those conversations around environment, to get involved in volunteering opportunities around nature recovery, for example. Yeah, things like that, really.
Good evening, I'm Jeremy. Welcome panel. Where do you see nature in 5 years' time?
Oh, this is a good question. So I think it's a really tough time for nature at the moment. The political climate is that there's not a lot of money about. Seeing huge changes in government funding from farming subsidy towards environmental subsidy, which is hopefully a step in the right direction. So I think the next 5 years, at the moment, those new farming subsidies are just coming out. So there's going to be big changes in the way that nature thrives in this country over that 5 year period. The big question for me is probably not around 5 years, but 50 years. What does nature look like in 10 years, 20 years? A lot of our focus at the moment is planting. And as Danielle's really succinctly put, some of the trees that we've got growing in this country that we see as staple trees at the moment, oaks and things like that, if climate change moves 1.5 to 3 degrees, they won't do very well in that climate. So I'm really looking at what the resilience is in our tree stock. So 5 years' time is quite short term in our lifetime of a tree. We're kind of looking at 900 years for an oak tree in its full life. So I'm looking at the next 100 years or so and what nature looks like then. I think it's an exciting time. I think there is a lot of people engaged in what's happening in nature. So I think there will be huge moves forward for nature in the next 5 years. There's a lot of organisations, companies, NGOs with targets for 2030. And those 2030 targets, there'll be an absolute arms race at the end to try and get everything done that they've promised in their targets. So this 5 years is quite exciting and quite pivotal for nature at the moment.
Yeah, that was really well put by Jon. That was a perfect question for you as well, I felt. I suppose from Nottingham City's perspective, I've got one perspective, I suppose, on nature locally and one globally. You think of a city and you don't think of it as a green space, but actually 38.1% of Nottingham City is actually green space or blue space. So that's kind of our rivers and waterways. So that's really good for the people of Nottingham, and the plan is to make more of that. We want to get up to 40%. I think it's by the year 2028 or 2030. I can't remember exactly, but we want to grow that nature, but not just have more of it, but connect it better. So in Nottingham, for example, we've got Forest Rec, we've got the Arboretum. If you're a hedgehog living on Forest Rec, you've got to get over Forest Road, you've got to get over a load of houses before you can actually get to the Arboretum. So we need to create little corridors, little green highways, I guess, for nature to be able to move better around our city and enrich more people's lives. So that's something we'd like to do more. Make the green spaces more resilient. Jon made that point about the trees previously. But yeah, make them drought resistant. That might mean we've got to have different species planted in our parks and green spaces that can cope with the heat, the climate that we're increasingly seeing. But primarily, I kind of see more citizen involvement, the residents of Nottingham getting more involved in nature in Nottingham, because they care. People really do care. There is a volunteering scheme called the Green Guardians that our Green Spaces team run in Nottingham, and we have really, really well attended volunteering days. People heard the call for some help to manage their local park, and they answered it in droves. People care and they want to help protect those spaces. So we want to do more of that. Who do our parks and open spaces belong to? They belong to the people of Nottingham, and yeah, we need to get them, break down that barrier where they feel like the council is the gatekeeper, that they can get involved and really make that space their own. So I'm really optimistic locally. Globally, I'm not so sure. I think that it's going to take a lot longer than 5 years to turn things around globally, but it's really important that we get that right. And I think we will, but we might just lose a little bit more nature before that happens, sadly.
I think it's helpful me going last amongst the panelists, because it's reassuring to hear Jon and Danielle what you're saying, because I think I'm probably going to echo some of it here as well. And when I got this question through in advance, I think I did sort of ponder over it for quite a while, because I think I've avoided trying to think about this too much as well. And I know certainly our government has got plans for where they'd like our environment to be in the next sort of 5 or 5 years or so, 5, 10 years, 20 years time. But frankly, similar to what Danielle was saying, I'm not entirely sure whether those goals are going to be reached. I might be being a little bit cynical here. Within 5 years, though, I don't expect to see a whole lot of significant changes to the state of our environment, to the state of nature. Personally, I think what needs to happen before that is a change to people's attitudes. Again, sorry, I'm being cynical here, but I think I'm worried as well that also might not happen until perhaps we experience firsthand the effects of climate change. Because frankly, we can sort of distance ourselves from the floods or the wildfires or the forced immigration. At the end of the day, it's not our back garden that's turned into desert, it's other people's. It's kind of happening in other continents, in other countries. So we can sort of say, well, that's not my problem yet. I do sincerely hope it doesn't take something like that for us to change our attitudes in favor of our environment. And I hope as a population that we can realize it before it gets to that point. And that's where maybe it goes back to some of those previous points that I was making around health, because I think we can make a really strong case with health. If in the next 5 years, like your question asked, if in the next 5 years we can realize what a crucial role our environment plays in keeping us healthy, then maybe we'll also see more interest in action in biodiversity and nature recovery and in reducing pollution. And then maybe in the 10 or 20, 30 years that follow that, then maybe we start to see our environment improve.
We want to thank you all for coming, giving your time to us, and you're always welcome to come and see us. And it's been lovely talking to you and listening to your things you really say to us. It's very brilliant you are to give us your time to come here. Thank you.
Hello panel, I'm Jon and I'd like to thank you for being with us this afternoon. And can I ask you panellists for your insight and thank you for those watching at home.
Please come see our performance of new work inspired by nature in opera. We'd love to share it with you. Hi panel, so support the work we do at Streetwise Opera. Do visit our website, please.